Before we begin, we want to let you know that some sensitive content is discussed during this episode, including that of sexual abuse. So please make sure to take care of yourself while listening.
Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Greetings, relatives. This is Jerry Tello with the National Compadres Network and the Healing Generations Institute podcast. And we want to welcome you again to another session where we lift up the blessings and teachings of many people that have worked and try to bring healing to our community and in the focus of healing generations of trauma as well. And today we are going to rebroadcast a really beautiful, powerful dialogue that I had with a maestra, with a teacher, with a leader, an advocate of issues related to sacred relationships and ending the cycles of domestic violence and assault. And I'm talking about Maestra Patricia Castillo. We want to invite you to listen and to take it in and then to really explore what is it that we have to do in order to really promote the generations of healing and stop the trauma that comes from the hurtful aspects of relationships. We offer this podcast in honor of the month in which we really focus on the ending of violence in relationships and the promoting of sacred relationships. Thank you very much and enjoy this dialogue with Maestra Patricia Castillo. Well, blessings to everyone. This is Jerry Tello here with the Healing Generations podcast. I want to thank you all for joining us today and for listening in and going on this journey. We call it a journey because, it's part of the whole process of us as a people, as families, as communities, but as individuals, beginning to look at how, we can live in this world in the best way we can with significant amount of respect, dignity, love, and trust. And our focus here on this podcast is really about healing. It's around healing generations because we recognize that there's been generations of wounds that have come to many of us and to our families and communities through a whole number of things, but definitely through oppression and racism and patriarchy in a whole number of colonized ways. And we want to heal from those generations of pain, but we also want to be able to lift up the generations of blessings and generations of medicine and traditions and values that we all carry as people. And we've attempted to do that in previous podcasts. Today, we're very, very blessed and fortunate to have with us Patricia Castillo, who is a longtime friend of mine. Consider her a comadre, a good friend, road dog. We've been on this journey a long time doing this work. She really is an elder, a wisdom keeper, a trailblazer, a truth speaker, a real warrior for our people. And she heads up the Peace Initiative out of San Antonio, Texas. And we were just talking a little while ago. She reminded me that we met some 30 years ago when we were youngsters, a lot younger on this road. But as part of our journey, we have journeyed together and collaborated as men and women on this journey of trying to address the pain that sometimes exists in relationships, but also trying to build better ways in which we can have sacred relationships and more harmony. And Patricia, I just want to thank you first of all, for all the work you do and all the work that you've done over the years. You really are a leader and a great example for so many people. And the reason why we're even talking about this today is because of people like you that have done amazing, amazing work. And so I want to thank you for joining us today. And today we're going to really focus on that sense of sacred relationships, but also wounds in our relationships and how we can bring more sacredness and harmony and deal with some of the wounds. So Patricia, welcome. And let me just turn it over to you and allow you to introduce yourself in the way that you'd like.
Jerry, thank you so much for inviting me to join you here today. The work that I do, clearly, you have been one of my inspirations from the very beginning. And it's probably closer to 35 years that we've known each other.
Wow.
And, but nevertheless, we have been on this journey together. Started my work as a social worker and activist very early on. One of the first things I had to do was work in a law center that was filled with women that were being abused. And that's where I kind of, jumped from the frying pan into the fire,
Mm.
and I've loved every step of the way that I've had the privilege to serve my community. But I think the most interesting thing about who I am is that it comes from, I recognize that every single job I've ever had, Jerry, has brought me to this place,
Mm.
because every single place that I've worked has shown me different aspects of the work that needed to be done. But
Mm.
it was slowly revealing itself at every position I ever held. And
Mhm.
that's what I think is the most powerful, is that I have that privilege of knowing legacy, the
Mhm.
legacy of family violence from every single position I've had. Because every single place I've worked, I ran into one, two, and three generations of people coming from the legacy of family violence. I
Mm.
started serving the moms, then later on, I was serving the daughters, and then later on, I was serving the granddaughters.
Oh, yeah.
And so, as a social worker, that's very powerful to be able to see that, and imagine if I had left San Antonio in 1985, when you told me I didn't have to do that if I didn't want to. If I'd have left, I wouldn't have had that experience,
Mhm.
of being able to, you call me a truth speaker, that's my truth, that I know people from two and three and four generations that have come from experiences of family violence, and have had the privilege of being able to work with members of all those generations that are trying to heal themselves, trying to change, trying to do the right thing, and have faced, enormous stumbling blocks, right?
Mm.
And so that's what I think is vital about, this place that I find myself in my 60s,
Mm.
that I've worked since I was, 24, and here I am, 62 this year.
Mm.
And so I seen the impact of what this has done to the familias, to my gente, to my neighbors, to my friends, to my coworkers, to, my fellow colleagues. It's because it can happen to any of us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if I had left, I wouldn't have had that perspective. I wouldn't
Mhm.
have had that view.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known, the entrenchment of, well, that now they're calling it here in the midst of COVID, they're calling domestic violence the shadow pandemic,
Mm.
in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
And so I wouldn't have known all of those things, if I had left San Antonio and gone to go find myself somewhere else. I
Mhm.
found myself here, and I found my niche in terms of what I needed to be focusing on. And
Mhm.
so I see that as a huge honor, as a huge privilege, to
Mm.
be able to speak from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that every place that you worked has kind of contributed. I wonder if you could share a little bit even about that learning that started early on in your life, your familia. Where do you come from? Tell us a little bit about your familia and the lessons that you learned. All of us grow up, in families, and there's blessings there, but there's also challenges and sometimes, woundedness that we experience that contribute to our whole ability to be able to relate to some of the familias that we deal with. So can you share with us a little bit about that journey and how that's contributed to your understanding and being able to do the work?
Of course, I come from, a familia of Chicanos that grew up on the west side, which here it's the barrio. In San Antonio, it's the barrio. When you go, to the west side of San Antonio, that's where all the raza lives, and that's where I grew up, in that barrio. But my parents were very traditional. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but my dad had 2 and 3 jobs, at any given time, because he was determined, for my mom to be able to stay home and take care of us, right? And so, gracias a Dios, my dad was a hard worker and he was a good provider, right? We never did without. But my parents were not knowledgeable and not aware of parenting skills, right? They didn't know about those things. And so their form of discipline was very harsh in terms of, corporal punishment. And so that's my experience of family violence. It's about corporal punishment. And then the other thing I'm so grateful for and thankful for is that my father was not violent towards my mother. I think he might have hit her one time, but that was it. That was like the first and the last that I know of, because I never saw anything like that again. But they were harsh in terms of how they treated us, right? And so that is like kind of my grounding of addressing family violence, is the corporal punishment piece, right? And then there was a lot of substance abuse in my family, a lot of drinking, and everybody drank. Everybody, partied all the time, lots of mariachi music, lots of ways of promoting that way of life, right? And then you live in San Antonio, and in San Antonio, you don't even need an excuse to have a party, right? And so aquí es puro party all the time, right? And so you fall into that cultura, right, of fiesta, constantly festejando, right? And if we're not skilled and knowledgeable, it's so easy to fall into that trap, of addiction, right? And then us being indigenos, when we're indigenos, we don't have the capacity to handle alcohol in our bodies, right? We don't have those genes, to tolerate and to withstand and deal with alcohol. And so I'm an alcoholic. I consider myself an alcoholic. And thank God I was able to give it up, eventually. But me and my mom one time sat down and counted all the men that we had lost in our family due to alcohol addiction. And in 4 generations, Jerry, in our family, and we're kind of a small family. We're not a big, we don't come from families where they had 10 and 12 kids, or everybody had like 2 and 3 kids, right? Small. We lost 22 men, Jerry, in 4 generations. 22 men, just así desaparecidos, because of wrecks, because of cirrhosis, because of, all kinds of things like that, where, we just could not handle, we're not equipped to handle the alcohol. And including in my family, my personal family, my brother died at 49 from cirrhosis of the liver from drinking alcohol. And so, that also shapes your view and shapes your perspective, right? The other thing is that I didn't acknowledge until I was probably in my 30s was the whole thing about sexual abuse, right? I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse from my mother's brother, but I never acknowledged it. I drank because of it. I'm sure of it now, that's why I drank. That was my coping mechanism, right? But I didn't actually deal with it until finally, and for real, like the early 90s. All right. And I had been in therapy 2 times before, but for some reason or another, I was not able to get to that, to that whole piece, right? I knew things were bothering me. I knew things were hurting me. I was dealing with my woundedness. I was dealing with all this stuff, with racism issues, with all of these other things, right? But just danced around the sexual abuse.
Yeah.
right? Because it was just too painful. But, eventually I found a therapist that I really felt safe with, and she helped me just really address that whole piece. And in the early 90s, I was already at the Peace Initiative, right? Because I started in 1990. And Jerry, by then I knew that my dealing with the issue of domestic violence in this city was something that I was going to get a lot of pushback, right?
Yes.
I knew it. And so one of the things that I knew also in the back of my head was, you got to get sober. You got to get sober, because if you're not sober, you're not going to be effective. And I also knew that when you're addressing these issues, I had to have credibility. I had to have respectability, and so, I was as good an alcoholic as, the ones you find anywhere, right? And so I was partying every weekend, on the St. Mary's Strip. To me, it was like the way of life, right? Partying. And so it wouldn't look good if on Friday and Saturday night, I'm partying, and drinking hasta las cachas, and everybody's seeing you. And then come Monday morning, I want to be respected and looked up to. And I said, no, that ain't going to work. That is not going to work. And so I had to really just challenge myself and commit to this process of healing through therapy and through, being able to someday be able to just rid myself of that scourge of alcoholism. So I was able to quit drinking by the time I was, it was in 1995 that I quit. I quit drinking in 95. And then in 96, I gave up tobacco. I quit smoking cigarettes because I was addicted to tobacco too. And, I used to work in the jail, and I used to smoke bugler with the inmates. Can you believe it? And the women would get mad at me. They would say, you shouldn't be smoking bugler because your nails are going to turn yellow and then they're going to look ugly. Y me regañaban, And so, but thank God I was able to give up the cigarettes eventually too. And so it was about trying to be, get rid of that poison from my body, right? Get rid of all those poisons and think clearly and see with some clear, open eyes, everything around me that's going on, and to really be able to pay attention. Be woke, como se dice, right? They say you got to be woke. I wanted to be woke. I wanted to know what was going on around me all the time, and I wanted to always be aware of my surroundings, so that people couldn't come and, get me from behind or whatever, or attack me in ways where I wouldn't be able to defend myself, especially because I'm talking about challenging a power structure that is not accustomed to being challenged, because when you're challenging, abusers, you're challenging the power structure and patriarchy. And I really had to have my wits about me. And all of that trouble and trauma from my family of abuse and sexual violence and all of that, I had to really just put it in its place. This is your place, and that's where you'll stay, because I got other stuff to do. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. Yeah.
And so that's kind of where my grounding is, and that's where it comes from.
Well, you really speak to probably a lot of things that many communities and families are struggling right now. You having people to shelter in place, and which means they have to be closer to each other. They got to be around each other, and it's amazing to me how we're in California, and how they could say that the AA meetings and the NA meetings couldn't meet, but the liquor stores were open. I mean, it's just amazing to me how policies and people don't understand. But the other thing that as you're speaking comes to mind is, it also reminds me of my upbringing, that I now realize that my parents were in a lot of pain. They were struggling a lot. They didn't know what to do with the racism. They didn't know what to do with the poverty and the oppression. They didn't know what to do with all the confusion, and they were very afraid. They were very afraid themselves of not being able to make it, not being able to feed us, not being able to defend us. They had to endure. And those times, the racism was I don't know if it's more direct, but it felt, more direct, and people were
Oh,
allowed
it
to do
was.
things, And so, I it's not a justification, but I began to understand that my dad's drinking, he was trying to deal with the pain, that my mom's even acceptance of certain things was no hay otro camino. She couldn't see another way,
Yeah.
and after a while, when society says that you're not valued, when society says that we can be abusive to you and you should accept it, and you begin to internalize and take that in, then that becomes part of even your interaction within your family. And I think that's what's happened to many of our families
Yeah.
throughout the years. I really want to acknowledge you for, being that truth teller, but that warrior. And what we realized as men, when we started the Compadres Network and decided to gather, and we wanted to do things for the communities. And early on, when we first gathered and we did our conocimiento, what we realized is that we were all jacked up. That even though we had the degrees and credentials and all of that, that we had wounds, that we had a lot of colonized thinking and ways in us, even though we were professionals. And so
Yes.
what we had to decide as men is that if we really were going to heal our people, we really were going to heal our families, if we really were going to heal each other, that we had to, first of all, acknowledge our woundedness and our patriarchy and our colonization and begin to go on a road to healing. And were one of those that began to do that work for yourself. I want to congratulate you on your sobriety, but congratulate you on your willingness to really deal with some things that are very painful, and now able to speak about it, because as you speak about it, I'm sure it reverberates with so many people. And because of your willingness to do that, as you said, you've helped generations. Right now we're in this, pandemic of COVID where people are together. And, obviously we knew all along, but now news media is saying, domestic violence and relationship violence is increasing, and drinking has gone up. The people that are making money are the liquor stores, and, because now
Big
people are
time.
drinking more. Yeah. I
Big
wonder if
time.
you could talk to that, talk a little bit about the woundedness that exists in our communities, that, and it really couples with the racism that is now being lifted up, because in
Mhm.
many of our communities, COVID is impacting especially Black and brown people at a higher rate because of the
Yeah.
inequities, because of our compromised health and all of those things. So I wonder if you could
Mhm.
speak to some of that and how that manifests in the work you're doing.
Well, people are trapped. Bottom line is people are trapped. Teachers have reached out to me because they're so concerned about their kids, their students. And
Yeah.
because the kids usually, if they make outcries of, physical or sexual abuse, it's usually a large majority of that outcry happens in the school setting where the children feel safe,
Yeah.
right? And so they're not seeing the kids. And then how does a child make an outcry in a Zoom
Mm-hmm.
class? The
Yeah.
kids are not going to do that, in where all their little classmates are on the laptop screen. They're not going to do that. And so everybody's really very worried about what's going to happen, if this thing ever lifts, because if it lifts, it's going to be like a tsunami,
Mm-hmm.
of people making outcries, of people needing shelter, of people, really, you know, and there's not going to be enough of us, those of us who do this work, the
Mm-hmm.
caseworkers and the advocates and the social workers and the therapists. And I mean, we don't have enough of them as it
Now.
is,
Right.
as it is right now. I mean, to me, it's shocking, that there's not enough places to send our people to. And then if you're a
Mm-hmm.
monolingual Spanish speaking person, si hablas solamente el español, no hay gente quien te pueda tratar con los tratamientos que se requieren, Ese es algo muy complicado, muy difícil, right? We need to be doing some planning in terms of how are we going to respond once this thing, lifts in a couple of years, maybe, because people are going to really, it's going to be bad. But right now, what we're seeing, unfortunately, like here in San Antonio, I cannot tell. I'm shocked at how many women have killed and stabbed men in San Antonio
Wow.
of late.
Wow. Wow.
I'm not. In one day. There were 2 men that got shot and 1 man that got stabbed in one day here in San
Wow.
Antonio. Last year, we had a record-breaking year of domestic violence cases, of murders of women, and it was 28. Well, in July, we were already here at 25. And so can you imagine what it's going to be doubled by December for sure, you know? And so, we're continuously in San Antonio, doing public service announcements, trying to get the word out, reaching out to all our clients, telling all our students that come to class, please take extra care right now. Don't keep things quiet. Don't keep secrets. Reach out to us. We'll try to figure out a way to help you, because I'm sure people feel so isolated, so terrorized, and if their perpetrators, are determined, to be on top of them, controlling them, dominating them, then, they're going to suffer a lot. They are suffering a lot is what I should say. They are suffering a lot. And so that's a huge concern for us. And then, the fact that this is going to be something that's going to affect the next several generations, Jerry, like we know that this stuff does. It affects several generations. And so that's a big, huge concern for us as well, that we're not prepared. We're not going to be ready. And then all of us are tired already. We're exhausted, from doing this work for so many years. And I'm constantly, anytime that I get a chance to talk to social work students, I'm like, we need you. We need you. We need your work. We need your passion. We need your ganas. We need you. Please, consider coming into this field. Please consider this area of work as somewhere where you see yourself as making some vital changes, having a vital impact, because there's a tremendous amount of need in our communities, with regard to the issues of family violence, domestic violence, dating violence, teen dating violence, elder domestic violence, because that's the other thing is that you think that it's just like, people between 20 and 50. No, we've got kids 15 and 16 years old that are being murdered, and we have elders that are in their 80s that are being murdered in domestic violence. Okay, so the span is huge in terms of it impacting people from all ages. Okay, and so we need people with skills and with knowledge and with dedication and with passion, to take on this issue, because Jerry, as you and I know, if our families don't do well, nothing does well beyond that. And if our families are suffering and are wounded and don't get the healing that they need, then everything else pays the price.
Yeah. As you're speaking, it really brings into light, the generations of systemic racism and systemic oppression that it almost seems programmed and kind of a plan that we never have enough resources, that especially for people of color, let them hurt each other, let them do whatever they need to each other. It's almost like it's not almost like, we recognize now. And we see it in the George Floyd case, but we also see it in many Black and brown communities and other communities of color, and especially to women. That when there's this attitude that you're not valued as much, then the pain that you experience is also not valued as much. And the other narrative is that you're to blame for it.
Yes.
And it's part of your culture. It's part of how you guys are. And I think that's part of the really systemic racism, where the false narratives is then shared about that's the way your culture is, that's the way you are. And so therefore it brings a tremendous amount of shame. And what I've begun to understand is, we talk about internalized oppression, which means you do not value yourself. Society does not value you. People don't value, and so you don't value yourself. And so then you accept certain behaviors, but also as men, we begin to internalize a negative way, a patriarchal, a very harmful way of relating to life, of relating to relationships. And one of the things that, I've had to over the years, and we've had to, is really correct this stigmatization that, domestic violence is cultural. It happens in all cultures. It happens in all populations. And even the concept for us as Mexicanos or Latinos, the concept of machismo, and what we've learned and we've begun to understand is that there's a false macho that is that patriarch, is that violent, is that controlling. But then there's a we call it hombre noble, the person that is honorable. And what we've recognized in the Compadres Network, we've tried to teach young men and older men, is that first step in moving towards your rites of passage of being an honorable, responsible man is honoring women.
Yes.
You come from women, you come from a mom. And if you don't understand the significance of honoring women, then that's not truly who you are in your culture. You've now taken on the oppressor's ways. You've now taken on the systemic ways of hurting yourself and hurting those close to you. Yes. So how is it, within the work that you do, that you're able really to kind of tease out the difference between the violence and really the sacredness in our families? Because, one of the things that, you mentioned is because there's a lot of drinking in my family too. And I call that drinking and that partying, not just cultura, I call it locura, right? The craziness that all of us grew up with. And then there's the sacred culture, right? How in your work do you, in a cultural way, begin to build on the cultural strengths of mujeres, of women, in order that they can not only break out of those cycles, but then to teach the next generation about what true honor is, of honoring yourself and honoring your relationships?
You know what, Jerry, I want to start with my experience with my mom. My mom was always embarrassed, and she finally confronted me one day because I would talk about being a survivor of sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. And she was like, "Why do you have to talk about that? Que vergüenza, and you don't have to bring that up. And why do you have to bring it up?" And so, I said, "You know what, Mom?" I said, "That was something that was done to me, and I was a child, and it's not my shame." The act itself was a shameful thing that was done to me, but I'm not going to own it because I was a victim of it. I wasn't somebody that asked for it. I didn't bring it upon myself. I didn't have the age to be able to consent to something like that. And so that's not eso no es mi vergüenza, Mama, And she goes, "Yes, but why do you have to talk about it?" And I said, "Because you know what, Mom? Other people are going through the same thing I did. And they're hanging their head in shame, and they don't have to, because that experience should not identify us. That's not our identity. It's one small thing that happened to us, but it's not who we are. And we have to come to that realization. Plus, the other thing too, Mom, is that experience that I had, it had the potential to destroy my relationship with you, because that was your brother. And I could have grown up hating you and never wanting to have anything to do with you, because you're the one that took me there with him. I could have hated you, Mother, but you know what? I chose to be victorious over that, and I chose to love you. Ooh. I love you, Mama, and I want to have a relationship with you, and I want you in my life, and I'm not going to let that experience and what that man did decide that for me. And so she was like, wow, like she just like, "Well, I never thought about it like that." And I said, "You need to think about it like that, Mommy, because this is the kind of trauma that can destroy families, Mama. And we have to decide for ourselves whether or not we're going to let that stuff, make decisions for our whole lifespan." And I chose to not let that experience decide for me how I was going to live with you and Daddy. I was not. That was not an acceptable option for me. And so I said, don't be embarrassed, Mama. You don't have nothing to be ashamed of. That wasn't you, and you don't have nothing to be ashamed of. And we're stronger for it. We're smarter for it. We're bolder for it. And that's what we have to focus on, Mama, so that we can continue to love each other, respect each other, enjoy each other, and have a strong, full, loving relationship with each other as a mother and as a daughter. And she was like, she just had not, that perspective or that angle just had never entered her mind, and we have to decide what we want to do with those kinds of experiences in our life. And we're strong. Us, women are strong. We're powerful beings, and so if we can survive the attacks of our perpetrator and our abuser, we can survive anything, Jerry. We can do anything because, think of all the skills and the capacity that it takes to come out of those things and those experiences and those traumas victorious. Think about all the skills. I mean, you got to be strong. You got to be smart. You got to know where to go find help. You got to know what to say. You got to know how to ask questions. You got to have endurance. You have to have capacity. You got to have all these skills to live through those kinds of wounding, traumatic experiences. And we live in a society that's, like you said, so busy telling you, qué tonta, pa que tú te lo buscaste. Qué tonta, y tú te lo mereces porque no te callas la boca, and they tell you things like that to shut you down and to embarrass you and to shame you. And those things are a lie, and that's what we have to realize and remember is that those things are a lie. If you come out of those experiences and you live to tell your story, you're somebody that's got it going on. And all of that stuff that you used to aguantar what you went through is the same skill set that you're going to use to come away with that and be victorious for yourself and for your kids, for your families. And so we gotta flip it. Yeah. We got to turn that coin around and look at the other side because it's the same thing. The same stuff that you use to survive is going to be your capacity to survive and to be victorious and to change and to transform yourself and to recreate your life. Recreate it for yourself and recreate it for your children. And that's the other thing that moves me is that I cannot tell you how many thousands of women I've known that have recreated themselves and their children's lives, by stepping away from those experiences of abuse and violence and sexual violence and completely transformed themselves and remade themselves. And that is totally doable. And it's what inspires me to keep going after, 40 plus years, Jerry, and it's, to me, I am like in awe of that power. I am in awe of that capacity and that ability of women to do that for themselves because it's not easy. They say that women, are more likely to be killed and murdered when they're in the process of breaking up with an abuser. Yeah. And so if you're going to work with somebody, you got to teach them how to stay safe, right? That's what we have to do is help pull in all of our knowledge and all of our experience and put it in their hands. And you know what? When they're ready, they'll use it. But so many of us are so busy trying to tell abused women what to do and why are you there and you shouldn't have taken that and you should have left a long time ago and and it's like, shut up. Ask them what kind of help you can offer them, but don't be telling them what to do. They already have one abuser that does that for them. And definitely don't judge them because we don't walk in their shoes. We don't know what their life is like. Only they do. They're the experts in their life. And that's what we have to focus on. And then offer to be of support. How can I help you? How can I be of support? You tell me what you want me to do to help you. I want to be here for you, but I'm going to follow your lead. because you're the expert in your life. And nobody knows that abuser like you do, because you're an expert on the abuser. So let's put our skill sets together and figure out how to keep you safe and keep you alive and keep you motivated to transform your life. And that's what we have to focus on with these kind of cases, and recognize that all of that work is sacred and it's doable, and it's about evolving and changing and transforming.
Wow. Wow. I really appreciate you sharing that, especially your story with your mom, and the courage and the work that you had to do. I know you had to do a lot of work
I did.
internally,
I
in order
did,
to be
Jerry.
able to water the healing part of you, the part that wanted to heal, as opposed to the wounded part
Yes.
that wanted to speak louder. And what it really says to me is the possibility. As you were speaking, I felt your ancestors' strength come through you. I felt the strong mujeres of generations just rising up in you. And I know the great grandmas are so proud, that they have a warrior up here that defends and protects, but also is más para servir, to serve and to help. At the same time, the work that we do is really trying to have men face their woundedness. And that comes with accountability too. And so
Yes.
and I know you work with, in terms of trying to get men to acknowledge their woundedness and acknowledge their patriarchy, and also to be accountable, for your behavior, because the first step of healing, especially for men, is acknowledgement.
Yes.
Acknowledge, not with vergüenza, but acknowledgement with truth of, I have these ways that are harmful. I have these attitudes that are harmful. I have these behaviors that are harmful. You first have to face yourself. And one of the things that I remember a long time ago, when I first began working in this field of domestic violence, is, the women didn't want us around at all, us men. I'd go to a conference and they'd kick us out, because they saw us all as perpetrators. But I
That's how the
remember,
feminists raised me.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But I remember, one of the groups that we, co-founded, Alianza, where me and Ricardo Carrillo came there because we wanted to heal families together.
Yes.
And I'll be real honest, you guys put us through the grill and the coals, and vetted us really strongly. But what really came through is that you did it with love and compassion. You weren't half stepping. You weren't, no. You made sure that we were straight. But your commitment was really that we all heal. And
Yes.
so I'd like, maybe you to share a few words to the men about what men need to do in order to heal, and in order to confront the woundedness that we bring to relationships sometimes. And we've been on this journey a long time, and I think you, in your compassion, but also in your direct accountability to men, have brought a lot of us to a different place of living.
Jerry, it's so easy for the men to fall into this trap, of thinking that this is where their power lies, right? That their power lies in being able to subjugate, their partner, their significant other. And it's such a false reality. It's such a false statement that it's so easy to be seduced
Mm,
by it, right? And I feel like that's what happens to the men, is that they get seduced by this false sense of power, and they buy into the lies, of
mm,
what it means to be a man in this society that is riddled with the culture of violence, right?
mhm,
The overarching umbrella of our whole society is the culture of violence. And it is for many a way of life, right? And I was fortunate in that I grew up with a man, my dad, who everything he did was for his family.
mm,
Every drop of sweat that came off of his brow was for his family. And he would say it too. No, es pa mis huercos, es pa mi
mm,
vieja, es pa mi familia. And he would say it, and he would say it with such a profound sense of knowing who he was and what he was about. And so my dad, everybody was always asking him to be the best man, right, in their weddings, because they loved how he treated my mom, and how he was with us. Everybody looked up to him. And my dad, he knew who he was in his family and what he was about. He would call my mom La Príncipe Charra, and I just loved the way that he was able to convey this message of, if you're going to be in a relationship with somebody, it ain't none of this 50-50. If you're going to be in a relationship with somebody, you got to give your whole self to that relationship. 100% and 100%. That's what's going to make a relationship solid and comprometidos and, committed to that relationship, and you have to give up a lot of things, to be a part of that, union. Because I asked him one day, I said, Daddy, how come all the men always ask you to be the best man? He sat me down and we just started talking, and he started saying all this stuff. And I was like, my God, I had no idea my dad had this knowing in him, And he goes, ¿Por qué crees que no dejo que tu abuelita se meta acá con nosotros? He would say, your grandmother's always trying to butt into our family business. And I don't let her, because she doesn't have any business in our family. This is our family, and I'm the head of this family, and we have our stuff together over here, and we're okay, and we love her, and we'll go see her all the time and be with her and everything, but she doesn't get to make decisions in our family, right? And so I was like, wow, and it was true. He used to do that with his mother. That's why his mother didn't like him, because she resented the fact that he didn't allow her to manipulate him or to butt into his family business stuff, right? Because he knew his role, he knew his place, he knew what he valued, and he knew what he was striving for with his family, right? And with the men, I think that there's so many outside influences, right, that are telling him how to be, that are controlling him, that are manipulating him, that are dominating him. I mean, right now, like I think about porn, and the porn culture and how it's affecting. There's little boys, Jerry, that are 9, 10, and 11 and are already addicted to porn. Can you imagine? Is that kid going to be able to grow up and have a powerful, intimate relationship with a significant other when their little brain is already warped by the time they're 15, and how they view a girl? No way. There's no way. And so, men have to really go inward. We have to go inward. We have to look at ourselves, look at, what is it, how I want my life to be, right? And, and you talk about, the substance abuse. The substance abuse is a false prophet. It might make you feel good for a little while, just like the porn. It might make you feel good for a little bit, but it's destroying your capacity for relating to people around you, right? And that's another thing. Like they said that Pornhub, they decided to offer everything for free because of the pandemic. I'm like, oh my God.
Wow.
Oh my God. And so how you view women, is going to be warped and distorted by how you see, what you see in porn. And so men really have to challenge themselves and think about, what it is they want for themselves in their family, and heal those wounds and acknowledge them. First of all, acknowledge that you've been wounded, acknowledge that you've been hurt. If you were also molested or raped as a child, that's not your shame, and you can heal from that.
Right.
Talk about it, bring it up, get with somebody that can help you with that. Jerry, I work with men right now, and I'm really shocked at how many men tell me, you're the first person that's ever asked me if I was sexually abused as a child. And I want to tell you, yes, I was. And, and So I'm the first person they've ever said anything to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have to, try to guide them to the trauma you experienced as a child is a huge part of the root system that has put you in this place where you're now being charged with domestic violence.
You know, you point to so many really profound, rudimentary things, and that we don't even consider when we talk about this. And what you're mentioning is my experience too. That we sit with men in Círculo, and a lot of people say, well, men don't like to talk, they don't like to share. Well, give them a safe place with somebody safe, and it just all comes out.
It does.
And when one man begins to share, well, this happened to me when I was a young boy, or we have a lot of men that have been incarcerated that get strip searched in there. It violates them, and then they come back out and supposed to relate with their kids. So this issue of violence, and how they really wound a lot of men, and at the same time, the sense of accountability that we as men really have to help other men. We know when somebody's acting out of pocket or out of bounds, and we need to be able to make them accountable, but to also help them when they need help, to gear them towards help. And so this issue is really a massive issue. As we're moving along, I also want to ask you a little bit about same-sex relationships and trans relationships too, because we know that violence crosses all boundaries. And if you could speak a little bit to that, because I know that the violence impacts us all that way.
Yes, it does. And, if you're living in one of those, alternative lifestyles, then, you too are vulnerable to any of this kind of, interpersonal experience. And then so much of the gay and lesbian community has also been oppressed, has also been the victims of hatred and violence and murder even. And so you come from that experience of being afraid, of outing who you are. I mean, we're much more permissive now, but that fear still exists for a lot of people. And if you're living in one of those kind of situations, the damage is going to be the same. It has the potential to be lifelong, and you have every right to be safe. No matter what kind of a relationship you're in, you have every right to be respected and to live free from violence, no matter what. And so please, if you're in that kind of a situation, reach out. There's lots of organizations that are doing work with the gay and lesbian community and the trans community. And nobody deserves to be in a situation where you're being mistreated, being disrespected, being violated, being injured, by your partner in a LGBTQ or trans relationship. It is unfortunately just as common in those communities as it is in the straight and heterosexual communities, unfortunately, Jerry.
Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for, I mean, we could go on. There's so much more to talk about,
Absolutely.
and for those of you that are interested, Patricia has a long list of credentials and experience. And this work is an ongoing work. We must all commit to do better. We must all commit to do our healing. We must all commit to voice truth around this. And this topic, is a delicate topic for many people. It triggers many people. I want to encourage any of you, that are feeling anything to reach out for help. To
Yes.
reach out to people that can comfort you, that can support you. But there's many hotlines. I don't know if there's any resources that you can mention right now, Patricia, that for anybody that's listening.
Well, the National Domestic Violence Hotline number is operates 24/7 and translates, Jerry, in up to 200 languages. Again, speaking to the fact that this is a global problem, right? You can come from whatever part of the world, and this can happen to you, right? But that number is 1-800-799-7233. And again, you can call any time of the day or night, any day, and somebody is there to listen and to help you and to guide you to the appropriate resources. They know what are the resources in every single community across this nation. And so that's definitely a resource you want to stay with. Of course, our website, thepeaceinitiative.net, you find a lot of resources there too in both English and Spanish. There's an excellent website called domesticshelters.org that covers so many topics that come from our work, and it also offers a lot of information in English and Spanish. Domesticshelters.org. Please look at that. A lot of people are learning on their own. And a lot of people are learning so that they can help their friend, their neighbor, their coworker, their sister, their comadre. People are starting to educate themselves. And I really love that, because nobody would do that before. Before, they would just say, nah, déjala, whatever, that's her fault, right? And blow it off. And not anymore. So many people are now getting involved. So many people are not just being, these bystanders that don't do something. Now they're active bystanders, and they're getting involved. They're asking questions. They're informing themselves, educating themselves so that they can be a part of the solution. And that's what we need. We need to help each other, get out of these situations and support each other while we're in the process of getting out of these situations.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you, Patricia, again for the years and years of work that you do, for your leadership, for your for your mentorship for so many people, and for your friendship too. We go way back, and we'll continue to do this work. I want to just remind the men that there are resources for you. If you struggle with any of these issues, any of the wounds that have been mentioned, or find yourself in acting in these ways that disrespect or dishonor or violate relationships, make sure you get help. It doesn't go away by itself.
No,
it's not going to heal. You have to do your work, and there are now organizations and places in which you can go.
Yes.
As we begin to wind this down, this is part of healing those generations of wounds, the oppression, the violence that has happened to us as people of color for thousands of years. But we must now take responsibility. We must take responsibility to really deal with our wounds, but also to begin to heal those wounds and bring to light the sacredness of our relationships, in order that what we pass on to the next generation has more sacredness and less woundedness.
Yes.
We want to thank you all once again, and invite you to share comments and share suggestions, but also to pass this on to friends that might want to listen to this podcast. We are attempting to include the voices of many, many people, and we just ask that you continue to do your own work and continue to do your own healing as well. And thank you all so much for who you are and what you do, and thank you for spending the time with us. May the Creator continue to bless you. Thank you.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.